It's called The Dream Founder, and you're right. The first one I created, so first one was called Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares. And
Yeah,
there I had created a framework called Persistent,
persistent.
which is, what you need to do to ensure that you have a successful startup.
Mm. Professor Dhruv Nath, thank you for accepting our request and joining this podcast. First of all, I would like to congratulate for coming out with the second book. And I must tell you that I read the first book and I really enjoyed reading all the case studies and the framework what you're given for the startup. I really enjoyed, and also there's a very practical way. And as you mentioned, you have come out with a second book, right? So I wanted to touch upon that and see what is this book call is all about, and what are the new framework you have come up in this book, and how it is going to add value to the founders and entire ecosystem. To begin, what is this book all about, Mr.
Oh,
Drunath?
thanks, Nidish, and always good fun to be with you. Uh, so this is the book. It's called The Dream Founder, and you're right. The first one I created. So first one was called Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares, and
Yeah,
there I had created a framework called Persistent,
persistent.
which is, what you need to do to ensure that you have a successful startup.
Mm.
And that book was focused largely on the subject of funding.
Mm.
But I realized when I was talking to a lot of founders, I realized that there were many other areas which may not be directly related to funding, but which are extremely important for the founder, right? So, for example, what is very, very important is how do you build your team, right? How do you get a co-founder? Who's the right co-founder? How do you recruit people? That's not easy. How do you ensure that your recruited people stay with you and therefore you have a stable team, right? So that's one issue. Then the other issue is marketing. So
Mm.
in the earlier book, I didn't talk about marketing. I talked about funding. Marketing is very, very important because it costs money and there are multiple ways to do it. And most startups do not have money, right? So how do you
Mm.
market? Then things like execution. So again, that's very, very important. Then, uh, one of the things that the last 2 years have taught us is you will always have crisis in life. And, these last 2 years has had the COVID crisis. So the many founders, just sat back and cursed the virus and said, look, can't do anything. All we will do all day is to watch Netflix and so on. But the real great guys, the great founders, they actually created an opportunity out of the crisis. And they became stronger. They gained market share. In some cases, they pivoted, right? So,
Mm.
what I have here is actually the first book I told you was on funding. This book is
Mm.
on everything else that the founder needs to do and be, right? And this
Mm.
dream, once again, is a framework, right? So
Yeah.
DREAM is an acronym where D stands for dream big, which basically
Mm.
means what? I mean, whatever you do, look at a huge canvas. Otherwise, at some stage you will stagnate, right?
Yes.
Second one is R, which is the right team. So
Mm.
build the right team, which has actually two parts. One is get the right people in place, and two, motivate them, develop them, build them up so that they
Mm.
improve and they are able to take the company forward along with you, right? And the team does not have to be only employees. It includes your co-founders, it includes employees, it includes dealers, distributors, partners, ultimately franchisees, anybody, right? A is execution, right? Which
Mm.
could mean multiple things. How do you market? How do you deliver? How do you manage your supply chain? How do you manage your warehousing? So everything is part of execution, right?
Mm.
What's your business plan? A is probably the most important. It stands for attitude,
Attitude.
right?
Mm.
Because to be a successful founder, or I would take it a step further, to be a successful
Mm.
human being, you need the right
Yeah.
attitude, right? So I've talked about multiple things that go into attitude. And M is, I spoke about COVID. So aim is make opportunities out of crisis, right? So dream big, build the right team, execute,
Okay.
attitude,
Attitude
make
and make out.
opportunities out of crisis. So that's Dream Founder. And like in the first book, this one also has a lot of cases,
Hmm.
um, both success stories and failures, because, as I always keep saying, you can learn a hell of a lot from failures. In fact, much more from failures than you can from successes. So that's broadly what I've done in the book. And like the earlier one, it's easy to read, it's humorous. I don't write
Yeah.
non-humorous stuff anyway. I mean, I don't like to write boring stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I should learn the art of writing from you also. Like the way you articulate the stories is really nice too, and I really enjoyed reading the first book, and I think the second book also will be there. Now, when you talk about this framework, uh, these frameworks is universal in nature, or like how do you define it actually? Like in the first book you talk about you spoke about persistence, and also I think you have given the framework to pitch when it comes to designing the pitch deck. Actually, I think you
Yeah.
spoke about there should be 11 or 12 slides actually. Uh, Now, when it comes to this book where you talk about the dream, that's I think DREAM, five letter. So, is it
Right.
universal, or is it very specific to maybe country specific or region specific?
So Nitish, these are generic things which will apply everywhere, right?
Mm.
I mean, you have to dream big, otherwise you have a small stagnating startup. You have to get the right team in place and you have to build them. You have to have the right attitude. So it's generic. It applies to any startup. It applies to any
Mm.
country, any environment, any vertical. The only thing is the specifics will change from place to place and from business to business, right? So for
Mm.
example, a very simple example, um, you know, let's take India.
Mm.
EdTech in India, which is education technology, which is, basically online education, where you're supporting education through the internet, that has become a
Mm.
very, very crowded space, right?
Yes.
So if you are focusing on edtech, if that is your area, then it's a very crowded space. It is not a good idea to get in. But what is not crowded is, I keep talking about India versus Bharat.
Mm.
India is the cities, the middle class and above, typically the English speaking category, right? Middle
Mm.
class and above, right? But there
Mm.
is a huge world out there which is in the villages and tier 4, tier 3 towns where
Yeah.
nobody speaks English, right? But
Yes.
education is still required. They have money. They may not be able to afford, let's say, a Byju's, but they can
Mm.
definitely afford a lower cost solution. So it
Yes.
is the same framework. It's the same dream founder, but depending on what you're doing, where you're doing, you have to apply it differently. That's all I'm saying.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, when you spoke about this rural India, recently I got a comment for one of the video for in our channel. I think that person is from North India and from rural area. I think Rajasthan or somewhere. And that video is for again it's on a startup funding. That person was requesting, sir, we are from rural area and we have a startup idea, but because of our communication, we are not able to reach out to you. So, is there any way
Correct.
to reach out to the investors who are in only situated in like urban area, tier one cities? What is your view on that, actually? Because rural area, it's a
So,
huge opportunities.
yeah. So, Nitish, you're absolutely right. That is an issue. Fortunately, what has happened is, investor interest is earlier it was concentrated in the metros. They realize that there is a lot of opportunity in metros. Okay, let me give you a little story, right?
Yeah.
And this may be a story in my next book. So, but I'll
Okay.
share that
So you are
story with
already
you. So
giving us a hint.
you have exclusive rights to the story right now. Okay, and
Wow.
from there I'll take
Okay.
off. So there is a very interesting company called Agrix, Agrix. Now, you've heard of Urban Clap or Urban Company as it is
Hmm.
called.
Yes.
So basically,
Yeah.
what are they doing? You need a plumber, you need your tap is leaking or something is happening, or you need a carpenter because you have some stuff to do, or electrician or whatever. And A, you don't have the skills, and B, you don't have the tools. So you will call somebody from Urban Clap and he'll do it for you. It
Hmm.
was a very good idea but it has got saturated today. So
Hmm.
now what is happening is there is a movement where this exactly the same model is moving to the villages. And this
Oh,
company called Agrix, what they are doing is they are saying, look, in a village, people don't, you know, you don't require a plumber because in any case,
hmm.
many villages you'll pick up water from the well, right? So you
Yes.
don't, or a tube well or whatever, right? You don't require a plumber. But what you require is the small and marginal farmer, right? The poor farmer. He may have only 1 acre of land or 2 acres of land, so small land holding. He cannot afford a tractor. He cannot
Hmm.
afford a harvester. He cannot afford any of these other things that he requires to make his agriculture more efficient and therefore more productive, right? He can't afford it. So what this guy has done is he's created an urban company version equivalent
Hmm.
of in the villages. So he's formed a
Hmm.
cluster of villages, and I think this is somewhere in Bihar, right?
Oh,
And in that cluster, he has a few tractors, he has a few harvesters, he has a few, those spray pumps which you can use to spray pesticide. So he has all that, and he also rents those out from local big farmers who already have tractors. And then, if anybody wants a service to be provided, so let's say the land has to be plowed, call Urban Clap, either phone them up or go through the app, and Urban Clap will send a person, not Urban Clap, Agrix will
agree.
send a person just as Urban Clap sends a plumber here, right? So it
Hmm.
works in exactly the same way, but look at the size
Wow.
of the opportunity. It's huge.
Hmm.
It's
Huge,
huge,
yeah.
right? So investors have begun to realize that the opportunity in tier 2, tier 3, not even tier 2, I would say tier 3 and 4 and villages is much,
Hmm.
much larger today than it is in the urban areas, the cities, Bombay,
Hmm.
Bangalore, Calcutta, and so
Hmm.
on, right? So investors are showing a lot of interest. So fortunately, that is not a problem. Yes, the problem is, a person who lives in, let's say, Agra or I don't know, take some small town, Hubli, right? Yes, the number of investors physically over there is not large, right? So it's
Yeah.
unlikely you'll be able to catch them there. My only comment to such people is try and attend physical events wherever they are held. So let's say if a person is in Hubli, try and come to Bangalore, attend physical event. There are many events going on,
Many
many events
events.
all the
Yes.
time, right? There are lots
Hmm.
of pitch sessions, lots of conclaves about startups and so on. And all you need is that one guy. You have a coffee with him for, let's say, 1 minute. If he gets interested in your idea, you hit it. He will then take you to his angel network and he'll ensure that, if your idea is good, you get funding. So, all I'm saying is it is very important for people to be visible. So
Visible.
founders who
Yeah.
are in smaller towns need to be visible, preferably physically in the metros, but also
Hmm.
on LinkedIn. Follow people, respond to what people are saying on LinkedIn. You will get noticed. So basically, people have to make an effort to get noticed by the investor community, and that can happen. And fortunately, the
Hmm.
investor community today is very happy to notice you, even if you're in a
Yeah.
small town, because they know the opportunity is bigger over there than in the big cities. I'll just give you an example. I recently went to Bhubaneswar and I met a lot of great founders who came from different tiny towns of Odisha,
Wow.
Raurkela. There
Hmm.
is a place called
Hmm.
Jhasagoda. I mean, they were doing great work. And they met
Wow.
me, and many of them now have put up for funding. So try
Wow.
and come to these major metros, major cities and meet people. Show your face, right? Get known.
Hmm.
You can't just sit
Hmm.
back in your town and say, boss, no investor comes to me. No, he won't come to you. You have to go out to places where the investor is there.
Hmm. But in the concern is also about the communication because most of these founders who are in village or non-metro, they are not so comfortable in English. The concern is
Yeah.
like how do we convince an investor because he believes like they think these founders they think because of the lack of communication in them, it's not possible for them to
Mhm.
reach out to the investors. So now the question is whether investors look the idea or a person or a communication of a person. Like I just wanted to clarify these things from your end.
So let me clarify. Let me clarify. I agree. It's a hurdle. I agree. However, I will distinguish between language and communication. You may not be able to speak English, right? But you
Yeah.
can be a great communicator. Now, if you
Mm.
cannot communicate even in your own language, which could be Hindi, which could be Kannada, which could be Telugu, whatever, if you can't do that, then you have a problem. I accept that.
Mm.
Then you have a problem. You need to improve your communication because, you get a chance with an investor for 2 minutes. In that 2 minutes, if you are not able to communicate your idea, you're out. But language is not an issue. I have met lots
Mm.
of founders who only speak Hindi, and it is very clear they're great founders, they have great companies. I'm very happy to invest in them. There's no problem. And that is true of
Mm.
most investors, not an issue. So I would say communication is an issue, language is not an issue. The fact that you don't know English, not a problem, not a
Not
problem.
a
But
problem.
if you can't communicate what you're trying to do, in simple terms, clarity, then you have a problem.
Wow. Okay. So this is one of the insight. I think I'll reply to the person who has commented. So language is
Okay.
not a problem. The way you communicate, what matters actually, whether irrespective of the
Yeah.
knowledge,
So obviously,
language.
obviously, this. Yeah, sorry, just to clarify,
Yeah.
obviously, if the guy speaks only Kannada and he
Mm.
comes to, let's say, Delhi, then he has a problem. But if he speaks only Kannada and he's in Bangalore, then there is no problem because there'll be enough investors who speak Kannada. So language is not an issue, communication is an issue.
Communication issue. Yeah. So I think this is one of the great insight. Yeah. If again again I have my perspective. Suppose a startup which is let us say it's from Hubli, and they want to operate only in Karnataka, then language may not be a problem. He can talk in English. If he's not talking like if he's not
Yeah,
comfortable in English, he can talk in Kannada also. But if you want to
no
expand,
problem, no
they
problem.
yeah, the problem comes when he wants to
Yeah,
expand the
yeah.
scale.
So,
So then he is necessary for
yeah,
him to learn other language so that he can at least talk to the vendors or talk to clients also
valid.
because that is very important.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely
mm,
valid. However, I'd clarify. So suppose you're doing something, let me talk about agrics, the example I had just taken.
mm,
Suppose somebody creates something like that in Karnataka, right?
mm,
The number of villages in Karnataka is so huge that the opportunity
true.
even within Karnataka is phenomenal, right?
You know,
So for a
yes,
long time to come, he doesn't need to go out of Karnataka. And
true.
if he wants to expand, maybe take one more state, maybe an adjacent state, maybe Maharashtra, maybe Telangana, maybe Andhra, maybe Tamil Nadu, and expand there. So,
Mm,
one more point I would like to make is agrics company turnover maybe less than a crore,
I
and they
think
say,
there
look,
is an issue, Mr. Dhruv. I think there was a network clause or something. Maybe
okay,
for 1 minute, I could not 1 minute, maybe 35, 40 seconds, I was not able to hear what you said actually.
so let me repeat. Is it okay
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's okay.
So, yeah. So, by the way, the problem is I have a geo connection here, and don't blame me, blame Mukesh Ambani.
Same thing.
You also have geo, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll just repeat.
Yeah.
See, one of the mistakes that founders make is they try and expand their footprint too fast, right? So you
Mm.
have a lot of companies, small companies, turnover maybe 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, but they say we are present in Karnataka, we are also present in Odisha, we are also present in UP, and we are trying to expand to Haryana and Rajasthan and Kerala and so on. Don't don't spread
Mm.
yourself too thin. If you are small, focus. So focus on one service or one product and focus on one geography. Establish a strong presence there, establish a strong
Mm.
brand. Once you've done that, you can start moving out. So, like I was saying, if a company like Agrix, which was
Mm.
into this renting out of tractor services and harvesting services and so on, if they are in Karnataka, there is no need for them to go beyond Karnataka because there is such a huge opportunity there. Once they are big in that area, then maybe that's the right time to expand to another state. So again,
Mm.
it's you don't it is not a good idea to suddenly expand everywhere because then you'll have a major problem, right? So it's
Mm.
important to focus one product or service, one geography, start there, build your brand, get well known, and then go beyond that.
That's a
You
good
know,
insight,
when
actually.
you're the size of Mukesh Ambani, you can do many things in many places. But most startup
Yeah,
founders are not the size of Mukesh Ambani.
true. And it takes time for them to reach that level also. So when they start, they have to start with the like, focus and small, so
That,
that
that's right.
later there is a all there
Focus.
is all like opportunity for them to grow. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh, Now, the big dream startup, right? The dream founder. Now,
This is
I'm
Dream Founder.
particularly curious to
Dream
dream founders.
Founder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, the dream founder. I'm particularly curious to know the A factor, that is attitude. So, what makes an entrepreneur like perfect or uh, convinced by from the point of view of investors? What are the attitude or what are the behavioral attitude he should carry?
Yeah. Okay. So there are many things which go into attitude. I'll give you one simple story, one simple example, right? Um, there is a founder, by the way, this is based in Karnataka, right?
Oh,
And this is
okay.
one of the stories in this book. It's a
Mm,
company called Go Desi, right? And
mm,
many people, many of your listeners would have heard of this. They basically sell Indian sweets, Indian candies, right?
mm,
Earlier, we used to have only, lemon flavor or orange flavor or strawberry flavor. These were international flavors. He has flavors which are basically, um, you know, things like imli or
mm.
tamarind, right?
Wow.
Or he has
Okay.
kathal. I don't know what it is called in other languages, but in Hindi we call it kathal, right? Or he has khatta aam, right? Sour
Mm.
mango or khatta nimbu, right? So he has all these things, completely
Wow.
unique thing. And these are manufactured by farmers. So the farmer
Mm,
grows the fruit and he is the one who does the processing. Go Desi does the branding, and the branding is under Desi. So it is Desi Pops, right?
mm,
So when this guy started, right, he was small, okay, and he would pick up the stuff from there. He had to deliver it. So firstly, he was selling it online on his
Oh,
own site as well
okay.
as on Amazon.
Mm,
But he was also supplying it to Kirana shops in Bangalore, right?
mm,
And
mm,
when he had to supply it to Kirana shops in Bangalore, what he did was he didn't have money. He borrowed his sister's two-wheeler scooter. Okay,
mm, mm,
personally, he would go from Kirana shop to Kirana shop with a bag and try and sell and supply to these Kirana shops, right?
mm,
Now, look at why. He's the founder, right? He's the chief, the CEO, founder, but he's
mm,
delivering this thing to each Kirana shop. Why is he doing that? Number one, because he does that, he knows what the Kirana shop owners are looking for. Okay, he
mm.
gets feedback. He knows how you need to sell. Because
Mm,
tomorrow, when he has other people, he has a bigger team, and they go to Kirana shops, he would need to train them on how to sell. How can he train them if he hasn't done it himself? Right? So
yes.
the key issue here is be willing to do everything. No job is below my dignity,
Mm,
right? He was
mm,
delivering on a two-wheeler, right, from person to person to person. So that is one of the key things in attitude, where you should not feel that, look, my job is I am the CEO, I am developing strategies, etc., etc.
yeah.
No, you have to be willing to do everything. Look, you can't do everything, but you have to be willing to do it because that's the only way. A, you will learn, and therefore you'll be able to train your guys. And B,
Mm,
there will be a lot of things which are dirty work. Nobody wants to do them. If the
mm,
boss shows the way, right, then people are more willing to do it. So that's one of the key things in attitude that the founder needs to have. Then, of course, there are many other things. One thing which is extremely important is, by the way, I've defined something else, another framework in this book. It's called the perfect attitude,
okay.
PERFECT. And perfect stands
Mm,
for, it's an acronym again. So P stands for persevering. Don't give up. You'll have
okay.
problems, you'll have all kinds of issues. Don't give up, right? That's a very, very key thing that we look for in founders. So, by the way, one very interesting thing which has happened is, COVID has hit everybody negatively. But for
Yes.
the investor, it's actually positive because he can see what the founder did during COVID. There are some people who just gave up and said, okay, I will sit back. And there are some people who are fighters. They said, I'll persevere, I'll keep trying, I'll keep pivoting. We look for fighters as investors, right? So that is one of the things we look for. Are you persevering or not? And then there are other issues, there are many other issues. For example, one big thing we look for is passion. A founder who's passionate about what he or she is doing will succeed. There will be problems along the way, but they'll figure out a way to succeed. On the other hand, if the only thing the founder wants is to make money and exit, the day there is a crisis, that is the end, right? So, passion, chasing your passion is extremely important. So, there are many things in attitude. These are some of the key ones.
Wow. I think unless a founder makes his hand dirty, he will not be knowing what is good for his business or how to
Absolutely,
run a business
absolutely,
actually.
absolutely,
Yeah.
boss. Absolutely. Yeah,
So that's where I think most of the founders are not willing to go because they think they are like sitting at the top chair. That's the top management,
that's right.
and they should
That's
not
right.
be doing all the work. But if
That's
that is
right.
the case, then the
Sure,
only option is
absolutely.
failure.
You have to. If you need to clean up the office because nobody has come, clean up the office. Yeah, it's your job.
Clean up
You're
the
the founder.
Yes, yes, yes. Wow, that's so that's wonderful. I think I should definitely read the second book also to
Sure, of
learn
course.
about different
And
concepts what you're introducing.
I will sign it over filter coffee with you. Filter coffee and
Oh,
idiyappam.
wow. Oh, that's a good combination actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for the offer. Yeah, now the second question. Recently, you posted some content in LinkedIn platform, something to do with the valuation. Now, when we talk about startup valuation, many people have different perspective. They come with their own mindset and their own way of the calculation and all. Now, is there any particular standard of evaluating a startup? If yes, what is that actually?
Okay. So first of all, I must say, valuation is very, very tough for early stage startups. When you get into later and later stage, when you grow, it becomes a little easier, although it is always a little complex. It's always an art. And I need to explain to your viewers why it's so complex.
Yeah.
Um, See, let me take a parallel from the stock market. So, in the
Mhm.
stock market, you have companies like HDFC Bank, Hindustan Lever, Larsen and Toubro, etc. Look at HDFC Bank, for instance. HDFC Bank started, I think, in 1994. So, it has about 26 years of history, right? Now, the way you normally do valuation, there is a standard formula called DCF or discounted
Mhm.
cash flow.
Cash
And
flow.
for
Yeah.
people who are not in finance, very simple terms, you try and project the future, look at the next 3 years or the next 5 years,
Mhm.
look at the profits that you're going to be getting in the next 4 or 5 years, and on those profits, you apply a formula, and that gives you today's valuation, right? So that is
Valuation.
DCF or discounted cash flow. Now, if you look at HDFC Bank or any of the others, Hindustan Lever or Reliance or whatever, they have a 25 or 30 or 60-year history, right?
Mhm.
And typically they have been growing, the profit has been growing by, let's say, between 16 and 22% every year, right? So it is very easy to project the past into the future and say, okay, 18% is almost certain, right? And therefore, DCF is you can calculate with a reasonable degree of accuracy.
Mhm.
Now you come to a startup, there is no past, right? There's no
Mhm.
past.
Mhm.
Now, there is no past. Secondly, there is no profit. There are startups who have come to us to raise money, and their past is only 4 months or 5 months. In one case, the guy had only 22 days of past history, right?
Wow.
Now, how
Okay.
do you project 22 days of past history or even 6 months of past history into the next 5 years? It's meaningless, isn't it?
Mhm.
So, you cannot project the future. In any case, guys like HDFC Bank and Hindustan Lever, they are very stable companies. You know what the business is. You can project it. Startups can pivot 6 times. You don't know
Yeah.
2 years later what the business will be. You have no idea, right?
Yes.
Just to give you an example, Zomato, when they started, they were only
Mhm.
into listing of food.
Listing. Yes.
Now their business is delivery, not listing,
Delivery.
right? They
Mhm.
pivoted. So you
Pivoted.
don't know
Yes.
what it's going to be 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line. So therefore, for multiple reasons, there is no way in hell you can project the future,
Mm,
right?
mm,
If you can't project the future, you can't use the DCF formula, isn't it? It's not possible. So what investors therefore do is, since there is no formula, they use thumb rules.
ah,
And there are many thumb rules. But I'll give you the one or two most commonly used ones. Once upon a time, the thumb rule used to be we would take a multiple of the revenue, the
mm,
annual revenue. But then we realized there are some people who are actually making a profit, some people who are
mm,
making heavy losses, some
mm,
people who are making a profit at the unit level, right? So the
mm,
unit, I mean, each unit that is sold, they are making a profit on that, even though overall the company is loss making. So then we moved away from revenues into gross margins or
mm.
unit margins. So one thumb rule, one very commonly used thumb rule is um, so your gross margin, I'm assuming your audience understands gross margins.
Yeah.
So look at your monthly gross margin, multiply that by 12, and that is your annualized gross margin, right? So let us say in a month, your gross margin, apart from the fixed expenses, the variable
Mm,
expenses, your gross margin, let us say, is 10 lakhs per month,
mm,
right? That means your annual gross margin is about 1.2 crores. So
mm,
roughly 8 to 10 times that is the valuation. That is the thumb rule, which means about 10 crores, right? So if
yeah.
you're getting a gross margin per month of 10 lakhs, it means you're getting a valuation of roughly 10 to 12, 10 crores, right? But
Mm,
that's only a very broad guideline, right? There are many factors which will pull it down or bring it up. And many of these factors are there here in this dream, right? So
okay.
if, for example, your founder is wonderful, great experience, very, very passionate, extremely persevering. Let's say the guy has already had a startup in the past, which he was able to sell at a profit. So his older investors got an exit, the valuation shoots up, right?
Mm,
On the other hand, if you have a business where it's a very crowded market, like today, urban
mm,
club is in a very, or edtech is in a very
yeah.
crowded market, right?
Yeah.
Then nobody knows whether you're likely to succeed or not because it's too crowded, too many players in
Mm,
the game, valuation goes down, right?
mm,
If your attitude is wonderful, extremely persevering, right, valuation goes up, right?
mm,
If you have something unique and you have, let's say, a couple of patents, valuation goes up, right? If the
mm,
opportunity is huge and it is untapped, valuation goes up. So there are many factors which can either pull down or bring up your valuation, but it's all centered around this 8 to 10 times annualized gross margin. That's the
mm,
most common method that is used.
mm. Okay.
But it's still
So
an art.
now, yeah.
It's still an art. I
Ah.
mean, ultimately,
Mm,
it's a negotiation game. See,
mm,
if the startup is very heavily in demand, so let's say somebody creates a completely unique method of healthcare in the villages, and these, unit economics is positive, there'll be a heavy demand. Many investors would want to invest in them, therefore the valuation goes up. If, on
mm.
the other hand, too many investors are not interested, valuation goes down. So it's a demand and supply situation, negotiation game ultimately.
Wow. Okay. So now, since we spoke about valuation, I want to touch upon the unicorns concepts
Ah,
in India. So generally, we call unicorns whose market valuation once it's crossed $1 billion, we call it as a unicorn. Now,
yeah,
if you observe, India has more than 100 unicorns as per the data available, but out of which hardly 10 or
yeah,
15% are profitable. As I think that's my observation, 10-15% of them are profitable, but
valid,
others are all still loss
valid,
making, but still they are able to cross 100, like $1 billion as a market cap. How is it possible?
valid.
Is it, yeah, is it valid actually? Because most of the time, for a common man, if a business is profit making, then he say, okay, it's a good business. If it is not a
Yeah,
profit making business, then generally it is not a good business for a common man, layman perspective. I'm thinking.
yeah,
So can you
yeah.
enlighten
No,
here
no,
actually
absolutely.
because you're an investor. Yeah.
Sure. It's a very long answer, but I'll share it with you. And you're right. This actually was a article I wrote in the Economic Times, I think about 2 3 weeks ago. Right. See,
Mm,
let me first go back to the late 90s, so which is about
mm,
25 years ago. uh, internet businesses had just about started, right? Before that, you had conventional businesses, which were not using the internet, but now internet businesses had started. And at that stage, everybody said, let us chase eyeballs. Now,
Mm.
eyeballs is what? Make sure that you get visitors to your site. You get more visitors. Ultimately, hopefully, it will convert into more revenues, more customers buying, and ultimately, it will convert to profits, right? So the world
Yeah.
started focusing on eyeballs, get eyeballs. That
Mm.
crashed, as you know, the dot-com bust
Mm.
in the early
Yes, that's
2000s,
one.
right? It crashed. Suddenly, people realized, look, getting visitors to your site is not enough. They actually must be willing to pay you. Otherwise, I mean, it's not a business, right? Just getting visitors is not enough. So then it moved from getting eyeballs to getting revenues, which
Mm.
I think was a very, very good step forward. So wonderful. So then people started focusing on revenues and investors kept putting money into companies that were revenue generating. Now, one interesting thing happened here, and I need to take a slight diversion.
Mm.
See, if you look at a conventional business, right? A conventional business requires a connect between the customer and the business. So if you're buying a TV, right, the dealer and the customer have to come together to buy a TV, correct?
Yes.
Which means there is a restriction on how geographically spread a business can become. Because if you want to be able to sell your TV across the country, you will need to have a dealer in every town, correct? Or multiple dealers in every town. Then what happened was the internet came in. Now, suddenly, the phrase that we use is geography has become history. Right?
Mm.
Geography is irrelevant because you can be sitting in Kanyakumari and you can be manufacturing TVs, and on Amazon, they
You
can be
can say.
sold to the remotest part of
Yeah.
Arunachal Pradesh or Kashmir or Gujarat or Kutch or wherever. Right? So now suddenly, uh, being geographically spread is not required because you have the internet, correct?
Mm.
And because of that, a few people in every internet related business, a few people become dominant market leaders.
Mm.
Earlier, you would have localized players. Now there is no concept of localized players because, for example, you look at Swiggy and Zomato, there's nobody else in that field. There's just two.
Yes.
Do e-commerce, there's only three people: Reliance Jio
Mm.
and this
Flip,
one, Amazon and
Flipkart.
Flipkart, and maybe now
Flipkart.
Tata's, right? So just four of
Yeah.
them. You look at travel portals, Make My
Mm.
Trip, Ease My Trip, maybe Yatra, and maybe one or two, Clear Trip. I think there are
Yeah.
three or four of
Yeah.
them, right? That's it. So no small player will survive. Ultimately, it's only the
Mm.
giants who survive because they're dominant players, right?
Mm.
So what investors started doing was they said, okay, wonderful. Because we are now looking at internet businesses,
Mm.
we will look at um, those companies which in their business are moving towards becoming dominant players.
Mm.
Okay, so those who are becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and we will support them, we'll keep funding them, right?
Mm.
And which is how Zomato and Swiggy became absolute giants, which is how Oyo Rooms has become a giant, which is how,
Mm.
Make My Trip and Ease My Trip have become giants, and so on, or Naukri for that matter. So all investors therefore started saying, okay, let us invest in companies which are growing towards the position of dominance. So they will be one of the three or four market leaders. And unfortunately, what happened was they said, okay, we will focus on growth, but we will not look at profitability.
Mm.
Let us focus on revenue at any cost. Let them grow. Let them reach a position of dominance.
Yeah.
Correct?
Mm.
Unfortunately, what happened was that because they were not focusing on profits, people kept making losses and they kept
Yeah.
getting funding. And the valuation kept increasing because they were getting closer and closer to dominance. Right?
Mm.
So that kept happening, and which is why you have such a large number of unicorns which are dominant. So in their own field, they're dominant players, right? They're market leaders, but they're not
Mm.
profitable because nobody focused on profitability. Right?
Mm. Yeah.
But over time, the market realized, when I say market, I mean investors as well as founders, look, this is not a sustainable model. You can't have, people making bigger and bigger losses every time and saying, don't worry, I'm becoming dominant.
Mm.
So at some stage, you have to make a profit. Now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it is not easy for a guy who's loss making, heavily loss making,
Mm.
to
Mm.
suddenly switch to profitability. For example, Zomato or Swiggy, the customer has got used to paying a certain amount. If they suddenly increase the amount that Zomato charges, the customer will say, "Okay, I'm not interested. I'll get it delivered directly from the restaurant." So it's not easy to
Yes.
switch. So what the investors look for now is, don't only focus on revenues. Yes, revenue is important, growth is important, but what we want is a path to profitability. It doesn't have to be profitable today, but if your losses are only increasing, if your unit economics is getting worse and worse or not getting better, then at no stage will you make a profit. We will not invest in you, right? So, which is why you have so many unicorns which are loss making. But
Mm.
fortunately, the environment, and this is global, it's not just India, the
Yes.
environment is changing where everybody is now looking at, look, boss, you want to make a loss, you make a loss, but show me your losses coming down. So, next year it should be halved, one more year later it should be a quarter, 1 year down the line, 3 years down the line, it should be profitable. Show me that path. If that is not there, I'm not willing to invest in you. So, fortunately, this is happening. And therefore,
True.
in fact, I would go to the extent of saying unicorn is a wrong term. Unicorn is
Okay.
the money you've raised. The term should be
Mm.
profits. How many people are
Mm.
getting more than X amount of profits? Or how many people are getting more than X amount of revenue and Y amounts of profit? Which is what you
Mm.
use for your listed companies like Reliance or Hindustan Lever or Nestle or ITC and so on. So I think we have to move towards those metrics, and fortunately, it is happening. So this concept of unicorn, that's why I said it's a little mythical, because I mean
Mm.
valuation for a loss-making company which keeps saying, "Don't worry, boss, I'll make bigger and bigger losses, but I'll grow." It's
Yeah.
becoming silly now. So
Mm.
that's
And
the
that's
background.
a Yeah, I think there's a lot of jokes on that also. I think after unknown or unheard startups and also known startup which was like known for loss making, they declare themselves as a unicorn. I think as a market, many people made a fun of it actually. For example, even I think Zomato is still yeah, they are improving, but still it is not a profit making
Yeah,
company. Zomato or even I
correct,
think
correct.
so. Nika, I
Most of
think
them,
they are
Oreo
break-even.
rooms,
Most
Oreo
of
rooms,
OYO rooms. Yeah, yeah,
the two best companies who have followed a very, very good path. One is InfoEdge, right, which is the
mm,
owners of Naukri. That
yeah.
has been profitable consistently. And
Mm.
I have a lot of respect for Sanjeev Bikhchandani, who's, by the way, he's written there
He's
is an
there.
interview
Yeah.
with him there, right over here.
Mm.
And the other one is India Mart, Dinesh Agarwal. So both of them focus on profits. They are growing
Profit.
and they are market leaders,
Mm.
but they're focusing on profits.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Yeah,
Nika is the other one, although their profits are low, but fortunately she's focusing on building a real business. These
real
unicorns are
business.
not real businesses, they're loss making. You need to
Loss
build a
making.
real business because this cannot
Yeah,
sustain.
true. That is true. I think you can also give a comment on like Zerodha, which is completely bootstrap and unicorn and like a highly profitable company now. Like
Yeah,
nobody
yeah,
there are many discount broker enter the market after they entered, still they're not able to reach
yeah,
where Zerodha is, and I think they have
correct,
a good number of active traders now, and also they have diversified their
yeah,
business and they're supporting many fintech startups. So that is one of the best
right,
case study we can see, or Indian startup
correct.
ecosystem can take it, Zerodha. And also if it is an international perspective, I think Zoho is another case study. I think everyone should learn from them
Yes,
actually.
yes, yes. So let me clarify
So,
one thing, one very important issue.
yeah.
There is so consumer facing startups, they are
Mm.
the ones usually which are more likely to be loss making, for the simple
Mm.
reason that the cost of acquiring a customer is normally huge marketing cost,
Huge.
right?
Yes.
But companies which are B2B, where
B2B.
your customer is a business, they are more likely to be profitable. I'm okay. I don't want to generalize, but in general, in many
Yes, that
cases,
is true.
Zoho is
Yeah.
a B2B business, right? The
Mm.
big advantage is that the level of marketing they need to do is not so high. It is actually more sales,
Sales.
right?
Yes.
And it's a SaaS company, which means once you've got a customer, that customer is there with you for years because he will
Yes.
keep paying
Yes.
you per month. So these are
True.
generally profitable. And in fact, today, one of the big things that investors look for is SaaS companies because these are
Yes.
likely to be profitable. And if they
Mm.
are unicorns, they are going to be genuine unicorns. So Zoho is one good example of
Yes.
that. Yes.
Yes, yes. That's I think there's a hope that created. I think Zerodha
Yeah.
and Zoho, both
Yeah.
B2C and B2B, and I think now some of the D2C brands are also coming actually. I don't know whether it is a profitable company. There's something called Dr. Vaidya, which is recently acquired by
Ah,
a big company.
yes.
Arjun,
Yes.
his founder, his founder
Arjun
is Mr.
Vaidya.
Arjun
Yes.
Vaidya.
Arjun
Yeah.
Vaidya.
So,
That's
yeah.
right.
So I
That's right.
think
So
D2C
the
is another.
so the
Hmm.
so the reason why Dr. Vaidya is profitable is it's a very old company. I remember talking to Arjun Vaidya once. His grandfather had started this company.
Started
Grandfather
it.
or great? And I
Yes.
think it's into Ayurved. I think it's
Ayurveda.
Ayurveda
Yes.
and natural
Hmm.
methods of treatment.
True.
And the big advantage there is over the last God knows how many years, 70, 80 years, they have
Legacy
built
is
a
there.
brand,
Yeah.
legacy and brand. So the
Hmm.
cost of marketing is very low. And customers who are come to them, they are very happy. They will continue to come to them, right? So the marketing cost is low. Cost of acquiring a new customer is very low. Existing
Hmm.
customer doesn't leave them. Naturally, it becomes profitable. They have a brand. So one of the reasons is that they have grown over the past 60, 70 years. Our
Yes.
unicorns today, they have tried to do that growth in 3 years or 4 years. And
Yes.
that is why the amount they've spent is phenomenal. If they were to do it a little more slowly, like Naukri has done or like
Hmm.
India Mart has done, they would also be highly sustainable businesses.
True. I think I can recall one joke when I think Ola and Uber when they acquired, like when they announced that the market leader and their market valuation is $1 billion, it was compared to Tata Motors. So
Ah,
Startup Motors still it is not a $1 billion company, I think,
yeah, correct,
when they have announced. But a
correct.
company without any physical assets, they are calling themselves a unicorn. I guess
So
that's a kind of
physical, yeah. So Nitish, physical asset is not really the issue. The issue is loss making.
loss making. Yeah,
So,
true.
and fortunately, that is now beginning to change. It has not changed. It's beginning to change. Yeah, I
Shift
agree
is
with
there.
you.
Yeah.
Tata Motors, Tata Steel, these are solid companies,
Mm.
profitable. They will carry on forever,
Mm.
and they don't need
Mm.
funds.
But
They have
yes,
enough
yes, that
money.
is true. Yeah, yeah. So that's really wonderful talking to you. Yeah, we're coming to the end of this podcast. Any tips for the founder, the dream founder?
I think one of the biggest issues I'd like to leave behind with any founder is focus on your business, don't focus on money. There
Mm.
are a lot of people, a lot of founders who say, I have raised so much at this kind of valuation. Now I have raised a series C, I've raised a series A, B, whatever. That's not
Mm.
important. The one thing I have learned from Sanjeev Bikhchandani, the founder of Naukri, is he says the customer's money is far more important than the investor's money.
Mm.
If you get the customer's money consistently and the customers keep coming back to you and paying you, then you will automatically get the investor's money. But if you get
Yes.
only the investor's money and not the customer's money, at some stage the investor's money will also stop. Right?
Mm.
So the one message I want to leave with people is don't focus on valuation, don't focus on raising funds, focus on your business. Yes, if you need
Mm.
the money, sure, raise the money. But that's not your focus. Your focus is the business. As long as you can do that, I mean, I think you have a good chance of
Wow.
making your startup successful.
Wow. Okay. So that's, I think, a very powerful note for
Yeah.
the founder and the future entrepreneurs who are planning to start their entrepreneurial journey. So I think that's wonderful to hear from you, Mr. Dhruv Nath. I think our audience will get some insights about the funding and the attitude aspect of a founder, and also the dream founder as whole concept actually.
Yeah.
So I really thank you. Thank you for sharing the insights on startup valuation and also introducing your book to the book to our viewers actually. I think many people will buy and read the book and get inspired. And I hope to connect with you soon for another round of podcast. And I think you're given a clue that you're also coming out with a third
Yes.
book,
Yes.
actually. So I'm
Yes.
eager to read that book as well.
Sure. Absolutely. Great. Great talking to you, Nidish.
Yeah, same here. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye bye.